You never know where vet med's going to take you. And apparently mine took me to a Russian spy whale in Norway.
She has examined over 400 wild dolphins. She appeared in 2 Hollywood films inspired by her patients. She evaluated a Russian spy whale in Norway. And she will tell you her career is nothing like she planned. And that's exactly the point. I'm about to share a wonderful, wide-ranging, and genuinely cinematic veterinary life. But it's not without its challenges. Dr. Juli Goldstein grew up on the coastline of Massachusetts and Florida, fell in love with sea creatures and conservation, and arrived at Auburn University's College of Veterinary Medicine with a plan to track towards a zoo residency. What actually came next was everything she didn't plan, and a career that reads like no one else's. She spent over a decade conducting field research on wild dolphins, participating in health assessments of more than 400 animals in the Indian River Lagoon. She became part of the rescue and medical team for the famous Winter and Hope, the dolphins featured in the Warner Brothers Dolphin Tale films, and appeared on screen as herself. She evaluated a Russian spy beluga whale in Norway. She did relief work, research, consulting, and technical advising on film sets from California to Vancouver to the United Kingdom. She started a podcast. She got certified in animal hospice and palliative care. And today she continues to care for a pod of dolphins in the Florida Keys and brings her one-of-a-kind clinical perspective to her role as technical service veterinarian for Pet Vivo, a veterinary biotech company translating human medicine technology into solutions for companion animals. How does this happen? It was built by someone who paid attention, stayed curious, gave herself grace, and said yes sometimes before she was sure she was ready. In this conversation, Dr. Juli shares the story behind the career, her lessons, and why being the voice for the voiceless in any species, in any setting, has been the thread that holds it all together. Let's get to the conversation with Dr. Juli Goldstein. When did you know that you were interested in veterinary medicine?
Well, I'm super excited to be here, and we have our Auburn connection, so War Eagle. And yeah, that's, I am the cliche answer to that question. So I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian from the day I could really talk and understand what that was. So I grew up with a German Shepherd, was my buddy. I would, back in the day, your parents would just let you out. I'd sit in the grass as like a 2-year-old with my, 90-pound German Shepherd. And that was my person. And so to this day, I still remember the day that we went to the vet clinic. He was getting older. I was maybe about 4 years old, maybe even as young as 3. And I wasn't allowed to go in the clinic, and they came out and didn't have my dog. And it turns out they had brought him there to be euthanized. And I didn't understand that, especially at that age. I mean, I think a lot of times we still don't understand it, but that was such a profound moment for me that I decided in that moment that I wanted to be a vet so no other animals would have to be put to sleep. Turns out, unfortunately, that's right, be a big part of our career, but it changed my life. And from that moment on, that's all I focused on. That's all I knew. I started volunteering in clinics as early as they would let me. I think I was maybe 9 years old or something, cleaning cages. And I thought that was like a big deal. And if I did a good job, I was allowed to go into the treatment room. And so that kind of slingshotted me to being very focused on getting to the end point, which was getting my DVM. So that is a very short version of that story, but.
Yeah, well, and I think when we initially spoke, you said that kind of early on, the image of being a veterinarian in general practice wasn't what you pictured for yourself. So as you were getting experience in clinic and just learning more and more as you grew older, what were you starting to form as what you wanted to do?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So as much as I've had dogs and cats my whole life, love small animal medicine. I've done a lot of small animal medicine, but I grew up first on the coastlines of Massachusetts and then in Florida. So I started getting exposed to a lot of environmental things and environmental animals and sea creatures and turtles and conservation. And when I was in high school, or even I think I was even in middle school, I went to summer camps that taught about conservation. One summer we had sea turtles that we raised and then released at the end of the season. And I started learning aspects of animal care that were very, I guess, unconventional, if you will, especially at that time. And so I started to develop a passion of, you know, it sounds silly, but, save the world, save the world's animals, the world's marine life, and educating myself and realizing that actually was a job, was a career. People typically think, oh, you're a marine biologist. Well, yes, but I wanted to be a doctor for the sea animals and for the oceans. And so that also kind of altered my career path and journey as I went up and through high school and then to college and veterinary school. But with that said, I still recognize, especially as I became educated in our veterinary practice, that core, whether it's small animal or large animal, core medicine, internal medicine, diagnostics, all of that was equally as important to know so that I could serve the elephants in the room, as we like to say in the vet world, or serve the different species, because as far as we've come with our education and knowledge of, say, marine creatures, there's so much we still don't know that we pull from small animal, equine, even human medicine at this point. So it was a nice way, I think, to embrace the science and the medicine to help a species that I became very passionate about.
Yeah, and I think I've heard some people too that started by saying they wanted to be a marine biologist, but what a marine biologist does and what a veterinarian does is very different. So
So
you
different.
start to really understand, oh, maybe not exactly what I
Right.
thought. Yeah. And then you had mentioned you did programs like MarVet and like I think it was EcoVet,
Yeah.
which I also participated in. When did you get involved in those types of programs?
So when I got into veterinary school, I had this plan, right? So I was going to do a small animal internship and then plan. We laugh in the vet, especially veterinarians, like, oh yeah, you had a plan. I get life in general, but I had the plan to do a small animal internship, then a zoo internship, then a zoo residency, and whatever came next. And that was kind of like I knew those were things. What I didn't know is that there were these summer kind of extended training program. So I was in a pre-vet club meeting and somebody came to speak to us about Marvet. And I was like, wait, they actually have this. Like I kind of knew I wanted to do, but they have like, you can get focused training on this. I was like, oh yeah, sign me up. Summer in Hawaii, Sarasota. So no, so I didn't know those things really existed until I was in veterinary school, and like yourself, going to school in the middle of Alabama and having an interest in sea creatures seemed a little odd, but because Auburn is as wonderful as it is, they were very supportive of me pursuing those. And I think I was one of the first students ever to really do that. So I became way more jazzed about seeing marine veterinarians and training under them. I think I was like first or second year vet student when I had that opportunity. And I was like, done. That's it. This is what I need to do.
Yeah, it's hard to find these opportunities to get hands-on, especially on the medicine side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of searching for internships and
Yeah.
rotations to get experience, and I found them, but for some of them, I spent very little time with the actual veterinarian. It was, which I still enjoyed it, but it still was a lot of cleaning up poop and preparing fish. And
I mean, that's kind of all of it. But I'll say this, especially if you've got listeners that are vet students or thinking about these things. So at Marvet, I met a very well-known, one of the grandfathers of marine mammal medicine, named Dr. Jay Sweeney. And he basically said, oh, you should come to Hawaii and train with me next summer. So this was after I did Marvet. And I was like, really? And I misspoke. So Marvet was in Florida. But anyway, so in that Marvet, I met this veterinarian and I said, okay, what do I need to do that with you? He said, well, I'm very busy. Just remind me, and, remind me periodically as it gets closer and that you want to do this and we'll make it happen. I kid you not. I think I emailed him or called him almost weekly for months because that's what he said to do. And guess what? Because of that, I had one of the best summers of my life where I was training with 3 different marine mammal vets, learning the ins and outs, actually doing diagnostic samples. I ended up doing an ultrasound project that became my CPC, if there's a or they call it something different, but my senior case presentation was on a dolphin in vet school, and that
Oh,
was because of this veterinarian that I was persistent and I did what he asked. If he told me to lay back, I would have, but it was basically like all he did was say that one thing, and I could have just forgotten about it or sent an email, he doesn't respond, but it was that persistence that allowed me to have those opportunities.
it definitely takes a lot of proactive work. Sure. And
Yes.
recognize that the effort that you put into things like that, people do recognize. And so having those experiences and it sounded like you were really building a really good network of people who are actively in this as a career. And it's still hard. We kind of chatted about that a little bit to make it a full-time job. Like there's a lot of challenges. So as you graduated vet school, what was your next step? How did you find your first job and how did you organize life as a veterinarian?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So I graduated and then I came back to Florida where I was living at the time, and I actually started volunteering at the local Oceanographic Institute while I was working in a small animal clinic, trying to build that first step of getting that core small animal information or knowledge. And why I did that, I volunteered, and an opportunity came up for me to participate in a wild dolphin research project. They had their ultrasonographer of all things. He couldn't make it. And they're like, here, you do it. I'm like, what? Like, I'd done ultrasound rotation at school. That was about it. They're like, no, 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 we'll teach you. And so I came out and participated in this field research project as the ultrasonographer. I look back, I'm like, boy, I was a lot bold. We're a lot more bolder when we're younger. And during that time, an opportunity to apply for a postdoctoral fellowship came up. And so that was a little out of my order of what I had in my mind of what I was going to go off and do an internship. But I was like, okay, this is kind of like an internship. And I was fortunate to be accepted into that program. So that kind of kicked off what became almost over a decade long, first part of my career doing it full time. And so, postdocs don't pay very well, and cost of living was a bit less then, but still it was challenging. So while I did my postdoc, I started doing small animal work on a relief basis. So it was before relief was as popular as it is now. And I would do that as much as possible because I did recognize that those skills are so important. I do enjoy small animal medicine, and I still wasn't convinced I could have a job doing this, so I needed to make sure I, kept those skills and kept refining those skills.
Yeah. You talked about like 10-year period of time.
Yeah.
And when I was reading some of your bios, there was one that started talking about how you helped with some type of, whether it was research or stranding networks.
Yeah.
Like, I think they threw out the number of 400 dolphins over a period of time. I don't remember the time.
Yeah.
Is this it where you're working all sorts of things with dolphins?
Absolutely. So this was I became a part of that program. It was at Harper Branch Oceanographic Institute at the time, and we had a summer research study that was a part of the comprehensive program. And so, yeah, we would go out into the field. It was a permitted activity, level A permit, which is like the highest level of quote harassment for a wild animal. They call it that term. We're not harassing them, but that is, technically we are. And basically, we would go out and conduct a male clinic type of examination. So we would net the animals, pull them onto a boat, which was like a floating exam room, if you will, and they would get a full exam, blood work, they'd get ultrasound, we'd pull a tooth. If there was an orifice, we'd sample it. And there was, over 100 different researchers from multiple institutions. Every dolphin had their own veterinarian that was caught. Sometimes they had two. Usually there were two on one. And they were out of the water for about 35 to 40 minutes top, and then they'd get released and then followed and tracked. And so that study equated to over 400 animals over that period of time that we knew up in the Indian River Lagoon. And so it was pretty remarkable, and it also teaches you a lot about wild animals and what they'll tolerate versus animals in managed care, which I also do, who don't tolerate things. But yeah, it contributed to, dolphins are top of the food chain. They're sentinels of ocean human health, and the things that we learned from those animals were extremely telling to what we're doing to our environment, which is kind of destroying it. So
On that note, I was going to ask you, what do you think were some of your biggest takeaways from a scientific perspective after doing that research?
yeah, I mean, one of the things that was just really like such an, I don't even think it's an aha moment, but just like a little bit disturbing is that those animals, we would do samples of their blubber. So we do surgery in the field too. And the things that we would find in their blubber samples were antibiotics. These animals had never been treated with anything. We found environmental contaminants like brake dust. We'd find things that were commonly used in agricultural. And I think what that is telling us is that anything that goes on your grass, anything that we put in the environment, it's ending up in our oceans and then ending up in the animals. And so they're able to store those things in their blubber. They're living in a very polluted environment, and it's compartmentalized in their blubber, so it's not making them sick. But could it? Absolutely. And so I think when people are like, oh, tree hugger, save the dolphins, what I used to say when I would lecture about this kind of one ocean, one health concept is that even if you could care less about, Flipper in the sea, what's happening to them is going to happen to us next, if it's not already. And so those are things that we really need to pay attention to. And the hope is that using that information could eventually help elicit policy change. And it's a long uphill battle. But, I still think about that now. Like, it's amazing those animals can survive in that kind of environment, but also like it's right there in the science what we're doing to the area and our planet that we're living in.
Absolutely. And you mentioned talks. So was that also a period of time where you went and shared a lot about what you were finding?
I did a lot of lectures nationally and both internationally. So it was exciting because it was very early in my career. I hadn't really traveled anywhere because I was so focused on vet school, other than going to Hawaii, which was great. But I spoke at international conferences in France and overseas, and also here in the US. I spoke at the AVMA one year about this, which was a really cool experience because AVMA is so classic medicine. It's our small animal, it's our large animal, and they gave me a little spot to talk about dolphins, but we're all interconnected. And so I think that was, One Health wasn't as big of a buzzword then as it is now. And if you think about, like, it's taken a long time to get even the AVMA to really talk about that. And I'm so happy to see that now because it really is, we are all connected and we need to pay attention to all of our environmental species because they're all telling us something.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't look as closely at the AVMA program this year. I was a little distracted, but
Yeah,
last year there was a lot on
that's
One Health and also how we're all connected globally
yeah.
as, One Health, veterinary medicine and everything. And I have written this down when we did our intro call because I was too interested. You did something about going to Norway
Yeah.
with some spy whales. I'm like, this has got it. I need to know more. So, as you're doing also your international travel, what was this thing in Norway that you
So
did?
that was wild. So that was in more recent years. So
Oh,
uh I'm not doing full-time marine mammal work currently. I am still doing marine mammal work, which we can obviously talk about. But because there's not a lot of people in the country, really in the world, that are experts in marine mammals, especially wild marine mammals that have kind of worked in tough conditions. We're out there, but there's not a lot of us that have done that. So a couple years ago, my partner that I've done a lot of this marine mammal work with, he's a scientific researcher also. He got a call about a wayward whale in Norway, a Russian spy whale that they'd found out. And because we've done some international work together, and basically, this beluga whale was found in Norwegian waters, and he had a GoPro like harness on him that said property of St. Petersburg. So it turns out, just like we have here in the US, we do have military animals that are used in the military, marine mammals. Most people aren't aware of it. It's not a secret, but the Navy Marine Mammal Program is a very prestigious program that exists here in this country. Well, at the time, Russia also and other countries, I'm sure, had beluga whales that they were using for similar things. And so this whale became a bit of a nuisance in Norway because he would go to the salmon fisheries, which is very big in that country, and figured out how when they'd feed the fish, the salmon, and then however they do it in their netting, other fish would come up to eat the food, and then he'd come and eat the fish. So salmon fishery, that's how these fishermen are making their living, and they see this like whale that's causing problems that can hurt their income. And Norway, what we have to remember, unfortunately, is a whaling nation. And so some organizations came in and started following this whale and trying to figure out, what do we do? Well, there are no marine mammal vets in Norway, for what, or really experts on that. I mean, they eat whales in Norway. They eat minke whales still, which kind of freaks me out, but that's, culturally, that's what they do. And so they brought us over to do an evaluation on this whale that was in managed care in captivity, but had somehow, figured it out and figured out how to survive in the wild. So he was like, it's unusual because a wild dolphin, or a wild whale, they're curious, but they're not going to come and solicit from a human unless you have some food or something that's interesting. Then maybe they will. But this whale was just kind of see people and be like, oh, I know people. People used to feed me, and so they knew where this whale was, and it was in a marina, and so we were able to go and evaluate it, and it knew some hand signals from the trainer, so I was able to look in its mouth and kind of look at its body condition and collect some, samples like blowhole samples, respiratory samples, and whatnot, and kind of get a picture of how this animal was surviving, and then advise on what the heck do we do with this animal now. And then there's government things that get involved, and so it was a really like fascinating time in my life. Also very cold,
okay.
probably the coldest I've ever been. But yeah, so it was interesting. So there were some discussions of trying to relocate him into like not a sanctuary area, but a safer area where he could stay and be monitored. And so that went on for a while. Unfortunately, there wasn't a happy ending to that story. He did end up getting shot, I believe, like a year or two after I did that. And my timeline may be off, but never did I think I'd be going to Norway to see a Russian spy beluga whale. You can look up the story. I was on the Norwegian news. I have no idea if they translated me correctly, but I just found it a little while ago. I was like, you never know where vet med's going to take you. And apparently mine took me to a Russian spy whale in Norway.
On that note, I think you have several instances
Yeah.
of where you never know where it's going to take you. And so kind of going back to, I think it's going back to that 10 years worth of work, there were people who caught on to some very specific stories. I think there were two dolphins in particular that kind of became quite popular. Hope and, oh, who's the other one?
Winter. Yeah.
Winter,
Yeah.
Winter. And so I know, especially locally, they were kind of famous dolphins, but the story got caught and they wanted to turn this into a movie. And so actually two movies.
Yeah.
Which you helped create the movie. And I think it even had you move to California.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So like, okay, how walk us through how this happened. Who called you up?
Another really strange flex in my life. So Winter and Hope. So Winter was the first dolphin in my part of my stranding team. We responded to her rescue. She was a young juvenile dolphin that had been wrapped in a crab pot around her fluke on the east coast of Florida. And at the time, we did not have a facility to manage full-time. Baby dolphins are 24/7, just like a human, and they're also non-releasable. So, unfortunately, at the institution where I was, we had gotten hit by 2 back-to-back hurricanes, which destroyed even our triage pool. So, we rescued her and brought her over to the Clearwater Marine Aquarium where they had, you know, more permanent facilities that we could work with this animal on, and we worked with their team to help rehab this animal, and as that went on, you know, pieces of her tail kept falling off. She had ischemic necrosis to the area. So fast forward, she lost her tail, and I will say, I mean, it was a team of it was all hands on deck. So probably 5 or 6 veterinarians, you know, Dr. Mike Walsh, who's another icon in the marine mammal world. He was there helping myself, my boss, our team. It was definitely a group effort for her medical care. And a human prosthetic company reached out to say, hey, you know, what about could we build her a tail? And so I was also a part of that team, and they would come over to my laboratory on the East Coast because I unfortunately had a lot of marine mammals that had been euthanized that we had in a cooler, and they would scan the flukes and the tails of those animals. So their death was not in vain either, you know, whether they were sick or had to be euthanized, because it's very hard to get that close to a live dolphin and have them sit still and really scan the anatomy. So they were able to get that information, and that parlayed into getting her prosthetic fluke, which had never been done before on a dolphin. And then all of a sudden you flash forward, Hollywood got news and they wanted to make a movie. And they wanted to involve the original team. So that was the first movie. I wasn't as involved other than when the second dolphin stranded, they were wrapping the first movie. It was very which was Hope, same thing. She was Hope was a dolphin that her mother had died. She was found on the East Coast nursing off of her dead mother. Again, we brought her over to Clearwater Marine Aquarium to rehab her, and that would most likely be her permanent home, which it ended up being. And so they wanted to make a movie about her too, because you got to have a sequel. And so that's a kind of a Cliff Notes version, but I ended up doing some technical advising. I was in the second movie. I was in the real footage of both movies. So if you watch them at the end, you can see both of them were cold December nights, very dramatic. But it was again another really strange, different thing that I did in my life, and had me in Hollywood, and that led to doing some more technical advising on other films and doing a little on-camera stuff too, which was fun. You know, mostly some cameos in various movies, but never in my career did I think a movie would be made, not on not one, but two of my patients. So I'm like, well, somebody got famous, so I'm glad it's the dolphins.
So, I mean, I'm trying to think, your life at that point, was it heavily on supporting movies? Did you still have to practice? Like, what was your day to day? Like,
Yeah, so my time at the Oceanographic Institute was kind of coming to an end. There were some things that changed within the program, and so I kind of jumped and started doing more Hollywood things, and during that time, I did pretty consistent relief work too. Still did some consulting and advising on marine mammal medicine, but it was much more small animal focused, other than the fun Hollywood things that would sometimes pay me, sometimes wouldn't. It just depended on the project. I was pitched for my own show at one point. That had always been one of my dreams. It still is. I grew up watching Emergency Vets on Animal Planet. I was like, I want to be like Kevin Fitzgerald. Now I'm really aging myself, but um, so it was kind of a mix of both. And I was a little more of a free agent, kind of, I'd come back to Florida and do some stuff here. And I was out there doing some relief at clinics there as well. And then when a movie project would come up, then I'd do that. So I was in Vancouver for several months, and then in the UK for about 5 or 6 months on the last film that we did right before COVID. So it
Oh,
was,
wow.
yeah, it was crazy.
It sounds great. And I know because you have all this free time, you decided to do a podcast too at that.
Yeah. Yeah, because why not, right?
Well, and I can relate. But I thought that was really interesting too, because you had mentioned that even when you were at Auburn, you had been part of the radio there. And I thought that was really cool that you were able to kind of bring that creative side of you and also that interest of maybe even having a TV series one day. But you said you got to meet a lot of really interesting people. I'm sure both through just working in the Hollywood side of things, but also this podcast, which I think you also interviewed a lot of people more Hollywood that had
Yeah.
either an animal relation or something. So when you kind of reflect over that time, do you have any particular stories or things that you really appreciated as part of your career?
Yeah, I mean, the podcast was so much fun, and it was, went from being a WEGL DJ on a classical music show to then starting this podcast. And I had become friends with one of the actresses in Dolphin Tale, became one of my very good friends. And so she and I started it together, and because we each had like different connections. And I mean, and it was basically people doing things with animals in Hollywood. And we interviewed the director of Free Willy. Everyone knows about Free Willy. I know the real story behind Free Willy, which is a lot different than the film, but we won't, we'll just, let people bask in the beauty of that movie. I mean, I talked to a pet psychic, which was really fascinating, and even met a gentleman that ran across was it the Gobi Desert, that had a dog follow him. This dog became his pet, and he wrote a book about it. And it was one thing that I guess that really stood out is the impact that animals have, no matter what aspect of life we're talking about, whether it's movies, whether it's you're going out for your run, whether it's just dealing with the grief and the loss. And so I really love that part of being able to talk to these people and learn about how special and how important the relationship and the bond that we have with all animal species. And so I miss it. I miss doing that. Maybe again one day.
Yeah. You make a good point, though, that the bond that we have with animals, and it is not just pets, although in my circle, pets come up a lot, but people even have a special respect and relationship with wildlife and all sorts of animals. And it allows us to have a quicker human connection, I think, when we bring that up. So that is really neat that you're able to see that from wildlife, on boats.
Yeah.
All day to a Hollywood TV set or movie set. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, the human animal bond I just got my certification in that too.
I saw
And
that.
it's important in all aspects. And something we need to pay attention to. And I think as veterinarians, we know that acutely well, and pet owners alike. So finding that commonality and that connection, I think, can make us better veterinarians, but also better humans in general. So
Yeah. And something else that I kind of noticed as you were talking, and I mean, even in a small animal clinic setting, everything we do is very teamwork based,
oh
right?
yeah.
Like everybody has their roles, we all come together, and when you know your team well and the sync is well, like it's magic.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you're pulling dolphins on a boat and having to do physical exams and rescuing dolphins. Like there's so much teamwork that goes into that. Is that something that you appreciated a lot? Did you like that teamwork aspect?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, whether you're talking about like a little chihuahua in a clinic or a massive 500-pound dolphin, I mean, is a chihuahua gonna cause you to go in the hospital? Actually, maybe. But I mean, I, I might need to rethink that. But when you're talking about the teamwork, so I'll use the dolphin example first. I mean, you know, this is a wild animal. Yeah, they all look like they're happy all the time, but that's, they're wild animals and they can hurt you and they have hurt people. I know a lot of trainers and scientists I've worked with have had broken ribs and severe injuries from working with these animals. But having that team together where everybody has their role and communication, and I think that can apply in the small animal world as well. Your technicians are keeping you from getting bit. Usually it's the vet causing someone else to get bit, but ultimately it's essential to make sure that the animals are safe, that everyone's getting what they need, and that ultimately you're working together for the health of the animal. And without the teamwork, it's, you know, people get hurt, things don't go right, and it can be dangerous no matter how big the animal.
This is this lifestyle sounds like a lot too. All these things that you're doing that we've
Yeah.
talked about so far. But if you think about what you enjoyed the most and a value, a part of the work that you could carry forward no matter what the how was, if that makes sense, like
Yeah.
your why. Like what was it that you think was the biggest things that you were learning about yourself and what you learned about work?
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough question. I think in general, and this could apply to even what I'm doing currently, is what I enjoy the most is being able to be that voice for the voiceless. So it sounds so simple and cliche, but animals tell you things, but not everybody knows how to listen, or no, not everybody knows. Maybe they don't have experience with that dog or that horse or that dolphin, but this career, this degree of being a veterinarian really allows you to do so much. And it teaches you how to be more observant in your everyday life. And for me, I grew up, there was this woman that would go on like one of the late night shows, I think Joan Embry. She was not a veterinarian, and she would sit there and have these exotic animals and teach the audience about them, things that you would never know. And I saw that, I'm like, I'm gonna be just like her. I said that a lot in my life, I think. And having the privilege of being a veterinarian and working with whatever species it is, and being able to help another species that cannot communicate freely with you, I think has been one of the most profound and most, I guess, valuable things that I'm most proud of, and a privilege that I'm honored to do every day. And so when things get hard, I have to remind myself that I'm there for them ultimately, and what a unique way to go through life and to be able to communicate with another species.
Yeah. And that can translate in a lot of different ways. You also, I think, love to learn based off your a lot of different
Yeah.
things that you have done along the way. Everything from ferrets to end of life care for
Yeah.
pet, all sorts of things. I think you have a personal story too that also connected you back without the loss and the grief.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't this you talked about losing your dog in vet school, but
Mhm.
that's different than the German Shepherd, right? Because you said
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
passed away back in like when you were 3 or
Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
So what kind of was the circle moment there with thinking back to your dog from vet school?
Yeah, that was, so we all have like our soul dogs, although I don't like to play favorites with my dogs. But my vet school dog, everybody had one of those, their pet that kind of got them through, and that dog got me through, the hardest what I thought were the hardest 4 years of my life. Then adulthood happened. But I had him all through vet school and afterwards, and he was diagnosed with cancer. And that was my first time as an adult pet owner, when I wasn't in school dealing with my own pet. And it profoundly changed my life. I like to say that was the first time I was on the other side of the exam table. So, and I learned, like most of us in the veterinary world, learned that trying to be a veterinarian for your own pet is nearly impossible unless it's something very basic. And so there were a lot of things that I recognized where I felt there was a need where uh, I don't know, lacking, but maybe lacking. Emotionally, I didn't know how to handle the grief. I didn't know what to do with those emotions because my doctor brain was trying to take over my pet owner brain, and when those two cross, it's very confusing. And I would find myself, I mean, I still cry to this day. I'd find myself crying at very random times, but I think we're better now as a society, but even then, it was like grieving a pet or a dog was not something openly talked about. And it was kind of like, oh, yeah, it's sad. Your dog died. And I realized that there was a very strong need for that kind of grief support, that end of life care, dealing with those emotions also. And so I was like, I wonder if this is a thing. Hospice and palliative care is a thing in human medicine, but especially at the time, it was not talked about. It was in veterinary medicine or animal medicine too. So I started investigating. I found a group that I looked into. I started my own nonprofit that I haven't done a lot with because, time. But when you're hearing about it a lot more now. I mean, we're all very familiar with like Lap of Love and those types of organizations, but the International Association for Animal Hospice and Palliative Care exists, and they have a certification, which I, only in recent years decided to do, not knowing what I would do with that, but knowing it was so important for me as a pet owner, but also as a veterinarian to have that knowledge to help other pet owners and clients because it's just still there's a bit of a stigma even now when you talk about pet grief. Like, we don't get bereavement time for pets, although some companies do now. I think it's a growing area, and I think it's a place where I can contribute because it's so much affected me in my life. And I have that unique perspective where, yeah, I'm the doctor that's doing the euthanasias, but I'm also the pet owner that's can't speak because I can't imagine my life without this animal.
Kind of going back to what I was saying on how we can connect in a unique way when it's around the human animal bond, being able to take a course like that or certification, excuse me,
Yeah.
and understand maybe everything from the human side of the experience, you can better connect and support people. And honestly, when people know you're a veterinarian, like, you're suddenly theirs. Like,
Yeah.
every second, right? Like, it's just like they're gonna appreciate that and share with you probably way more than you want. But with that knowledge and those tools, you'll have that for any moment. Like, I can foresee that being really helpful no matter where you are.
I absolutely. I think it applies not just in traditional practice. I think it applies, like you said, pretty much every aspect of life, even if it's just someone sitting next to me on the plane that figures out I'm a veterinarian and starts asking questions. It's a good life knowledge skill if it's of interest to you. And, at some point I think I'd like to do more with it. But veterinarians were empathic, and I feel that pain, and I've felt it with every animal that I've had to euthanize, and so knowing how to help the other people around me is a skill that I, continue to try to refine.
Yeah. And I don't know if everyone understands too, like, for the people who work with wildlife or zoo or marine, the trainers or keepers or whatever their titles are, they fall in love with their animals too, just like in like a
100%.
pet. parent. And so when there is a loss of an animal, or you're having to consider end of life decisions for those animals, like everybody emotionally also feels it there too. So again, it's across the animal health world. It things apply. There's a lot of emotions because people get into the field. If they're working with an animal, they have probably gotten into that field because they love animals
Absolutely.
for any other reason. So it is emotional because we
Yeah.
put so much of ourselves into it. And I think the wisdom that you have gained from that, that will definitely be helpful.
It certainly has thus far, and I'm hoping it will continue to be too, because you're exactly right. These animals are part of who they are too. And so helping them through that transition is something that I hate to say I enjoy doing it, but I'm grateful that I have the knowledge and the skills to at least help.
It's rewarding.
It's
Yeah.
rewarding. Yeah. Yeah.
Enjoy is a
Enjoy
weird
is like,
word.
no, I don't ever want to have to be in that position, but if I have to be, at least I feel like I can contribute and shepherd them through that.
Yeah. In addition to the many things on your CV and the things that you're involved in all at the same time, because again, this it's like you still have all of these. You still are a veterinarian for a potted dolphin, and then you also have more of an industry job. So
Yeah.
you're a veterinarian with a company, Pet Vivo. So how did you discover Pet Vivo, and what do you do there? I'm sure still combining a lot of the things that you have learned over the years.
Absolutely. So another flex that I didn't that's kind of a pun too, that I didn't expect. And so I relocated back to Florida and I continue to do a lot of different things, but I was looking to get into the industry because I felt like that was a unique way that I could use my veterinary degree, not only learn a new skill, but apply the skills that I have. And so I saw a job posting and it had to do with osteoarthritis and joint injections. I was like, well, that sounds interesting and challenging and different. And we discussed I have a heart for senior pets, and a passion, for pain management, which goes along with the hospice and palliative care things. And so applied for this position and realized that when we're in vet school, we don't learn a fraction of what is involved with osteoarthritis. I mean, I had a lot to contribute to this job, but also, like, I have learned a ton about how complicated that disease is. It is not just an old dog disease, and so many of our animals and people suffer from it. And so that aspect has been really rewarding and interesting to me. And this particular job, one of the things that I do love about it is it's kind of like my life. I'm not just doing one thing. So I am doing pharmacovigilance. That was something new for me. I'm giving lectures. I'm helping pet owners, but I'm also helping veterinarians, which has been really, really fun because I'm helping veterinarians help their patients. And I'm helping with the R&D team. We're a small but mighty team. So this one job is a very good kind of like blueprint with how my life has been because it's doing like all these different things and I thrive in those types of environments because I'm constantly learning, but also as I learn more, I can contribute more and have a very unique perspective. And marine mammals get osteoarthritis too. So, and zoo animals. And so the product that we have called Spring has been used in multiple species. So that's very exciting for me too, because I feel like it's all these interesting things I've done in my life kind of coming together in one place, which is hard to do.
It is, yeah. Well, and on that note too, because you've done so many things and you're one veterinarian who has been able to apply all of, the skills that we learn as veterinarians, yes, from vet school, but just practicing and with
Yeah.
our types of brains that we learn how to critically think and work with teams and all the things. When you think back over your career so far and you were going to give like lessons from your career to share with others in our profession, what is one or two things that you think about?
Oh, I think one of the things would be that even if you're doing something that just seems like it's not gonna either propel your career or doesn't really move the needle for you, those are probably the very things that are gonna have a profound impact on your career. So, having that open mind and try to learn from every situation that you're find yourself in, even if it's not how you imagine my career. My career is nothing how I imagined it was gonna be. So, that would be the first thing. Pay attention to even the little things that you're doing because you never know when those skills may come in handy, 10 years, 5 years, even next week because you've done it, maybe somebody else hasn't. So, I would say that, and that I think the other piece of that would be is to give yourself grace in everything that you're doing. As veterinarians, we are terrible about that. And we're fortunate that there are resources like NAMV. I've talked to them quite a bit before, but we are so hard on ourselves as veterinarians because we're driven, because vet school is really, really hard, and maybe your career isn't in the place where you want it to be, but you are a doctor and nobody can take that away from you. And I think that would be the second thing is just give yourself grace and remember how far you've come, even if you're not where you want to be yet.
Yeah, those are really, really good. And when I ask about gratitude, what is something you're really, really grateful for right now?
Mm. I mean, I'm grateful to be talking to you because this has been great to connect. I'm grateful that I have a profession that I can do so much with and ultimately make a difference. And the day-to-day and the work stress that we all experience, coming back to that is been very important for me personally. I mean, because of this, I know how to handle my senior fat diabetic cat I have in my house. And, vet school was hard, life is hard, but I'm grateful that I have made it this far and continue to be able to learn every day.
That was Dr. Juli Goldstein, and reminding us of her two lessons: pay attention to even the little things you're doing because you never know when those skills will matter. The thing that seems like a detour might be exactly what opens the next door. And second, give yourself grace. However far you still feel that you have to go, look at how far you've already come. If you want to connect with Dr. Juli, follow her work, or learn more about Pet Vivo, links are in the show notes. For the key takeaways and reflection questions from today's conversation, head over to the Sprinkle of Wisdom Substack for the Podcast Club Guide. Please subscribe and share this episode with someone in veterinary medicine who might appreciate Dr. Juli's experience and wisdom. And until next time, keep reimagining what's possible in veterinary life.